I'm going to preface this by saying that you should probably have this on in the background while you're doing other things. You just play a video game, do your chores, whatever it is you have to do. Treat this like a podcast almost. There's no video, nothing interesting to look at, just me and my words, unscripted. I recommend that you do something else while you listen to this and keep your hands occupied and enjoy my thoughts. This part was pre-recorded before the rest of it, so I was just here to let you know and give you a heads up in advance. Thank you for listening. It was not my intention to read this today and record my thoughts on it. I was not going to do that. I had a rough day and I just didn't want to, but I've been in so much pain, and I took my laptop with me to the bathroom, and I was doubling over on the toilet, just releasing. I thought, well, you know what? I'm going through a very horrible, poopy experience in a literal sense, so why don't I go and read a horrible, poopy comic? I had a very negative opinion of Wolverine Origin 2, partly because it feels like a cash grab. I don't think there's a reason for it to exist. I feel like the story could be skipped. It doesn't add much of value to Wolverine's story overall. So this was written by Kieron Gillen. He's not a particularly famous comic writer. He's done some stuff for Boom Studios and other smaller publishers, but he's most famous for his work with Marvel, particularly on the X-Men, which he started doing around the late 2000s. I would not have picked him to do this. He's a writer with a lot of good ideas. In fact, he would actually revisit some of the ideas from this later during a Krakoa-era X-Men run, a big event story he was working on. So that's kind of neat. But I would not have picked him to do this. Nobody from the original was involved in this, and I think that kind of shows. So Andy Kubert stopped working with Marvel at some point during the mid to late 2000s. He went on to go work for other publishers. He has a lot of success right now at Skybound. But his brother Adam still works quite frequently with Marvel. He did back then, back when this came out, and he still does. So they thought, well, if we can't get Andy, we can get Adam. So Adam pencils this. He inks it too, just like Andy did. The colorist, Frank Martin. I did not look up Frank Martin beforehand. I didn't actually look up anybody beforehand on this. I already knew who Gillen and Kubert were, so forgot Martin. So to get this out of the way first, the main thing people had against Wolverine Origin was they think it was a mistake to show us his backstory. We never saw much of it before Weapon X and World War II, and I think a lot of people thought that was for the best, and it probably was. But Wolverine Origin, I think, brilliantly showed us his backstory, his past, what happened there. And I really enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite X-Men related miniseries. Maybe one of my favorite miniseries Marvel has just published in general. I love it. It's artistic. It's beautiful. The art is just gorgeous. And the writing is really solid. And I love a lot of the additions it makes to the X-Men mythos, specifically the Wolverine side of things. You could not read it and not really lose much in the long run, but I still think it's a worthwhile read. To me, Origin 2 comes across like the series people were scared Wolverine Origin would be. Origin 2 just feels like that. I also wanted to clarify real quick. The picture I have is a collage of various covers, which I tend to do for these, but there's only 5, which would look weird on screen, so I used a variant cover for issue number 1 by Salvador Larroca, a very prominent X-Men illustrator who's collaborated quite frequently with Chris Claremont, who's the X-Men legend, needs no introduction. So one of these is not by Kubert and looks very different. One on the bottom right, but I wanted the visual cohesion. Sorry if I am sounding lower energy than normal. It's because, again, I'm tired. I've had a rough day. I've been unable to sleep because of the pain. I'm powering through that to record this. By this point, this was, I think, 2013 that they started publishing the first issue. Quesada had, by this point, if I recall, stepped down as editor-in-chief. I think he was the longest tenured editor-in-chief Marvel had had up to that point. And he had stepped down, hired a new guy in his place who was not there very long, but his tenure was kind of controversial. This was made with none of the original people from the first, and it shows. This doesn't feel like it has the same passion, love, or care You may remember if you saw the last one that I said Adam Kuber's one of my favorite comic artists. Him and Andy both, but I prefer Adam. I do not like Adam Kubert's art here as much as I do Andy Kubert's art for the first one. The first thing about that is you may think these covers look amazing, and they do. They're gorgeous. I'd frame these on my wall if I could. But the problem is that he's trying to draw somewhat an imitation of the kind of art style that Andy took on when he did the first Origin miniseries. And it's not necessarily Adam's strong suit to be drawing in this style. And I'd wager that it makes the art suffer at points. Like Origin 1, where Andy inked that, Adam is inking this one too. He's penciling and inking it. And there are points where the inking is just not very good. This makes me believe that he did have to work with more rigid deadlines than what Andy worked with on the original. The inking lacks the depth of the original, and it's not as richly detailed. And the coloring is painfully obvious, a digital coloring job that lacks the warmth and vibrance of the original to the point where it kind of looks distracting in a way, just how the art's not bad. It's pretty good art. In fact, it's great at many points. But there are parts of this comic that also look kind of not necessarily bad, but poor, I'd say. Lack of detail on so many things. The coloring and the inking is not elevating the pencils. That's the job of the inking and the coloring, is to elevate the pencils. And that's the double-edged sword of a penciler inking their own pencils, is that you can get a result where ultimately they were trying to make the art look good themselves without the expectation of it being elevated, or with the expectation that the colorist is going to elevate it. And if nobody's elevating the penciler and the penciler is expecting the kind of elevation, you get a result that leaves you wanting in the art department. And I kind of get something like that from the art here. It gets better in later issues, particularly the last couple. The art gets progressively better as the series goes on, but there's not a big gulf or anything like that. It's just a small, incremental increase over time. Gillen's writing here, I feel, I don't hate it. I think tonally he's going for something similar to what the first one was trying to go for, and I think he reached that somewhat well. And the framing device here is not anywhere near as clever as the original, because I think, again, the first one was just lightning in a bottle, and they just couldn't with this one. I did find on this reread that I liked it a lot more than I originally did. I found quite a few things to enjoy. Like I said, the art is actually quite good at several points. Great, even. And there's some other things here I'll go into with the plot. The whole point here with this one was that Wolverine Origin was the origin of Wolverine. And this is to bridge the gap of kind of when we saw him as the feral beast, almost, at the end of the first Wolverine Origin series, and how he became the person we knew him as in the time he fought in World War I and World War II, and got himself involved in the Weapon X program. Now, minor spoilers ahead. Like always, I'm going to give a generalized plot synopsis. I'm not going to spoil a lot of the big, oh my gosh kind of moments, but I will be saying enough to just generally describe how the plot goes throughout all the issues. And if you want to go in completely spoiler-free, you can click away now if you don't care, or if you want to hear my synopsis and use that as a determining factor for if you want to go check this out yourself, go ahead. And if you've already read it, then you have nothing to worry about. So this takes place in, I think, 1905 or 1907, a few decades after the original Wolverine Origin series. He's living in the wilderness amongst a wolf pack who has accepted him as one of their own, and he's part of the pack. He's out hunting and gathering one day when he finds the pack completely slaughtered, and he doesn't know what's going on, but he finds a polar bear or something like that, some bear. I don't know the specific kind of bear, and he's confused naturally with this big super bear stalking the forest where him and the wolf pack he called his family hunted. And there's no words here. This is completely devoid of dialogue. Well, not completely, but it's mostly devoid of dialogue, and I really liked this. I thought that was a smart decision, and it really created a captivating opening. He fights the bear and he wins, and then This naturally gets the attention of the Essex Corporation, who sent the bear there. And those of you big X-Men fans know that the Essex Corporation is Nathaniel Essex. That's his company, and Nathaniel Essex is one of the most famous X-Men villains, Mr. Sinister, as he's more properly known. And Mr. Sinister is a villain who is indebted to Apocalypse. The only reason he's doing what he's doing is thanks to Apocalypse. So that's actually kind of an interesting connection. You wouldn't know that just reading this. That creates a connection between this and Rise of Apocalypse that a new reader wouldn't even be able to tell. So they begin trying to track down Logan. I know he's James, but at this point we're just going to call him Logan because that's what everybody does. So they track down Logan with the help of Creed. This man who, kind of like Logan, is rather bestial and rough looking. Clearly he's got to be a mutant of some kind. Later on they tell us he's a mutant anyways. It's not a twist or anything like that. You can tell that from a mile away. Creed takes him to the circus where Logan can be part of the freak show, and they can bank off of him as just oh yeah, this crazy freak here. And eventually the Essex Corporation strikes a deal with the ringmaster of the circus to let him run experiments on Logan, and Logan is subject to all these cruel experiments that test his healing factor and just what he can do. It's an interesting scene. Following this, Creed's sister Clara, she's fallen in love with Logan throughout the course of his stay at the circus and helps take him away, and they try to run away from the Essex Corporation, and Clara tries to help rehabilitate Logan and make him more humane, try to get him used to living amongst other people in society again. It works, kind of, but he keeps having these violent outbursts where, like, his animal instinct just takes over and he accidentally just gets people hurt and they have to move on to yet another place. Just are constantly on the run, not just because of trying to escape the watchful eye of the Essex Corporation, but also because he keeps hurting people by accident. His animal instinct just takes over. He can't seem to control it. And Clara just keeps telling him, that's the animal inside you. You have to learn to control it. And throughout the series, she does try to help Logan control it, but one night they're ambushed by people from the Essex Corporation. They sneak into the place they're staying at. While this is after Logan and Clara just made whoopee on the bed, and Logan is just completely naked, and he's fighting off all these dudes. Early on to the fight, it's just normal, but then he just sees red, and when he wakes up, Clara is bleeding on the floor, all the goons are dead, and then Creed just walks in and goes, "Oh my god, Clara! Whoever did this to her is gonna pay!" And then he leads Logan to the Essex Corporation headquarters to go and confront Nathaniel Essex about this. And there, Nathaniel Essex explains, like, yeah, I'm the guy who sent the bear. I'm the one who did, and he starts monologuing. Logan is just in a savage state of just anger. It's just like, I'm not even going to listen to you. Then he learns that Creed was not so trustworthy after all. And we knew Creed was a bad person from early on when we were first introduced to him. But now we fully learn, like, the extent of just what Creed is done. And I wouldn't necessarily say it's unforgivable, but he's a pretty terrible person. And it's kind of hard to just forgive that. And Logan just decides, screw this guy. And he has a big fight against Creed, who's just like, oh yeah, do it, coward, just try and kill me. So I don't necessarily want to spoil what happens, but at the end of this, now left pondering, maybe the animal isn't the problem. The animal was the part of me that was at peace. Maybe the problem is the man. And he just kind of wanders off, man with no name style, just into the wilderness, just to go drift around, find where to go next. And I think that's a kind of an interesting idea. A lot of people in these comics are like, there's an animal inside him that he can't control. But I like the idea that this presents, where it's not necessarily that he can't control the inner animal inside of him. It's more so that Logan the man is such a tortured soul that he's the one who's not in control. I think that's a very interesting kind of reverse that actually would make a lot of sense. Yeah, he goes really bestial and fights on pure. That inner animal, when he lets it out, does just rip and tear, but the man, Logan, is unhinged. He's not the frail James Howlett anymore. He is just something else. And it's kind of sad to see that. We watched his transformation, and now, again, he's left to wonder, who is it that's the problem? Is it the animal or the man? Now, I walked out of this pleasantly surprised on this reread, thinking this was not as bad as I thought. By the end, Adam Kubert's art does look legitimately incredible at points. The coloring job is good. I want to clarify that. It might have sounded like I was dogging on it earlier. The coloring job on this is really good. It's not amazing, and it's not elevating the art, but it is a very strongly above average and high quality coloring job that is probably above what a lot of normal titles of this era were given. It's good, it's just the original was such a high bar, and that you're trying to mooch off of that one's mojo, and then you don't even have half the mojo. You were doomed from the start by comparing yourself to the original. I think this series is actually not bad. I think it's okay. But I think that it doomed itself from the start with the comparisons to the first one. Hichikara, when she read this, was not particularly impressed, and I expected that. She was actually a lot kinder to this than I expected, but she was not particularly impressed. Her reaction was also just, what importance does this have? And I had to explain to her how the ending of this, the final page, sets up a recurring thing with Wolverine's history that is very significant to him in particular, and what his history in the future going forward. The final page sets up and begins what would eventually, chronologically, what was already at the time in prior comics, but what sets up here is like establishes how this one aspect of Wolverine's history that is pretty significant would later, and how where that started from and why it continues to haunt him. I won't say exactly what is on this final page and what exactly it sets up, because, again, I don't want to spoil too much. But it is a twist reveal, kind of, which actually worked out, I think, decently well. It kind of plays into, Creed is another, like, Dog Logan, Mr. Logan style fake-out character who you think is someone else or related to someone else, but, like, not actually, only to find out, like, oh my gosh, I was not seeing the bigger picture here once you finally learn the truth. Now, a lot of my stance with the first Wolverine origin was, we did not need this series, it did not need to exist, but yet it exists and it is great. My stance on this one is, we did not need this, it did not need to exist, and the fact that we already were in this situation and got gold, and now we're in the same situation with this, and we're not getting gold. It just kind of makes it look worse. Just, you opened a can of worms you didn't have to open, and you lucked out through sheer hard work, effort, blood, sweat, and tears, and passion. And then you try doing the same thing here with less passion, less blood, sweat, and tears, and the result is just something that you're trying to cook with only some of the ingredients. Trying to add on to that winning recipe you made several years ago, and then you're only using some of the original ingredients, and it looks great and superficially will remind you of that first recipe, but one bite and you are not being sent to Flavor Town. You are eating food that would be mildly delicious and above the quality of like a TV dinner. You're eating what's basically average quality restaurant food almost, and which would be, by the standard of like Gordon Ramsay, utter dog crap. I don't know. Is my food analogy making sense? I feel like that was me creating something unnecessary to get a point across that I had already gotten across previously, which is exactly what this series does. Boom! Waha! That was setup. I was setting up for that. Overall, I'd say that I don't hate this. I don't think it's bad either. Again, Adam Kubert doing a great job, even though he's trying to not do his own style, but rather try to do his style crossed with Andy Kubert's art in the original. Again, the covers are amazing, and the art on the penciling itself is pretty good for the most part. There's a few bits, especially like early on, where it just doesn't look that great. And the coloring is pretty good too, except in the instances where it does kind of draw attention to lackluster inking or penciling not being as detailed as it should be. This is not up to Adam Kubert's usual level of detail, and we'll see that actually soon enough. So, yeah, my opinions on this, a little on the fence, but my opinions are leaning positive. I would give this maybe a 5.5 out of 10. Yeah, a 5.5 out of 10 sounds good. Clara is another one of many lost loves of Wolverine we can just add to the list. Unlike Rose, she doesn't even have any interesting thematic elements to add to Wolverine's love life. She's just kind of there, which is exactly what this whole story is in a way, just kind of there. I'm glad that it tried to do some new things and ask some interesting questions, which, I did really appreciate, but I feel like this was unnecessary because it doesn't take a genius to be able to tell us that Wolverine's going to eventually become unferal and reintegrate into society to an extent because he fought in World War One, World War Two, and because of Marvel's sliding timescale, Vietnam. Oh yeah, that's a thing. Wolverine fought in Vietnam. It wasn't originally like that at all, but as the weird sliding timescale with Marvel keeps happening, that made it so Wolverine fought in Vietnam, and I believe he fought in Korea too. Wolverine does. No wonder Wolverine's so violent. He's in every freaking war to ever exist. What's next? Are we gonna get Wolverine Origin 3 where we find out he took part in the Persian Gulf War? I don't know, guys. Watch out. New miniseries coming out from Marvel. Wolverine Warpath. Because the sliding time scale, 50 years from now, it's going to be oh, yeah, he fought in the second Persian Gulf War. I can't wait for the sequel where we reveal that Wolverine was there, boots on the ground in Ukraine, slicing up Slavs during the Russia-Ukraine war. Excuse my tangent, my rant, my medicine's wearing off, so, I'm probably more prone to becoming loose and unhinged at this point, like I tend to do when I'm off my medicine. So yeah, there was a lot of good ideas here. The art is mostly really good, but this did not need to exist. The story does not add enough to warrant its existence. And as far as I know, this doesn't really get referenced again. I don't know, I could be wrong. Gillen created this big overarching story around Sinister during the Krakoa era. I believe it was Destiny of X relaunch. He was kind of like the architect of that, and he probably referenced this somewhere there, but outside of, again, explaining this one thing with the last page, nothing about this series really sticks. Chronologically, in the reading order, this is our first instance of the Essex Corporation and seeing Nathaniel Essex, which is really cool because the Essex Corporation and Nathaniel Essex are a big part of other stories here. It's set even during this time frame. It's just that a lot of them they're time travel stories or they're framed as flashbacks. He did an entire X-Men issue which shows us a lot of Nathaniel Essex's backstory, and it's primarily set in the 1800s, but the problem is that it's framed as a flashback after the first 4 or 5 pages. So I can't put it on the reading list because so I can't put it around here on the reading list. Well, for the best anyways, you probably should just read it with the rest of the Mr. Sinister stuff he wrote during the Destiny of X relaunch, because it's all meant to be read together to tell you the big Sins of Sinister story he was working on. I don't think Gillen's a bad writer. In fact, I think he's done some stuff that's quite good, but I also think he's done some stuff that is quite mediocre as well. A lot of great writers have mediocre elements to their bodies of work, so it'll be fun getting to reappraise Gillen's work when we get to stuff that's much later down in the reading order. I feel like it'll be fun to reappraise his work here, but at least now, going off of this is not a good first impression for him. And I was thinking to myself, this was at the forefront of my mind when I was reading this. This is the first thing on my reading order that I've listed as completely skippable. And that's for good reason. This has cool ideas, this has cool art, but it is completely skippable because you're not really losing anything by choosing not to read it. Gillen ended up writing, I think it was before this, he ended up writing an issue of X-Men Origins, one focused on Sabretooth. And his Sabretooth issue goes into the history of Wolverine and Sabretooth's rivalry. And we see Victor Creed's backstory there in Sabretooth Origin, and it covers some of the same ground here. In fact, the cool, big final thing that they reveal here at the end of Origin 2 is just heavily shown off in X-Men Origins Sabretooth. And at this point, I just say that unless you really want to read this, you really want more Wolverine Origin, you just really want to see cool Adam Kubert art, or unless you really want to be a completionist and read everything, just read X-Men Origins Sabretooth instead, which is actually not too far down the reading list. There's not a whole lot to gain here that you won't gain from that, which is kind of sad because Wolverine isn't even the title character in that one shot. And that's just one comic too, that's a one shot. Summarize my thoughts before we close out here. 5.5 out of 10. My thoughts were leaning positive. I don't really think that there's much reason to read this, but I think that It's a somewhat enjoyable story, and it's fine enough for what it is. I enjoyed getting to look at Adam Kubert art for 5 consecutive issues. He's one of my favorite comic book artists. I liked Nathaniel Essex and the Essex Corporation, their involvement in the story. And Clara was a cool character, even though, like I said, she's a character of pretty much zero consequence. My thoughts leaning slightly positive, but I'm overall mixed on it. What did you think of Wolverine Origin 2? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Do you mixed on it like I am? Do you think I'm being too kind to it? Do you think I'm being too hard on it? What do you think? Or leave a comment below or reach out and tell me. Love to hear what you have to say. Love to discuss this. Very all in on open discussion here. Make sure to come back here next time when we talk about Wolverine, the Amazing Immortal Man, and Other Bloody Tales, an anthology collection of stories set around this period of his life, generally just before World War One, so after this, maybe before and during this. And there's probably stories set after, like the war and stuff. I don't know. It's been a long time since I read it, and that's why I'm going through it again. I don't remember it very well, pretty much at all, aside from like one story in there, so it'll be fun getting to revisit that. And if you want to revisit it with me, you can feel free to check it out wherever you find comic books. I'm sure you can find it there somewhere. It's not a very expensive or sought after issue, but make sure to check it out if you want to read along with me, or if you just want to hear me ramble about it. Make sure to tune in next time and hear what I have to say about it. Thank you for watching and supporting my autistic ramblings, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.